The Conquest of the Void. The stars themselves seemed to bow before the might of the Zephyrian dominion. For 3 centuries, their crystalline warships had swept through the galaxy like a cosmic plague, leaving nothing but subjugated worlds and broken civilizations in their wake. The latest conquest had been particularly satisfying, an entire sector brought to heel in less than a standard cycle. Admiral Vextar stood at the observation deck of his flagship, the Eternal Supremacy, watching the debris of yet another fallen fleet drift through the void. His 6 arms folded in a gesture of satisfaction, his obsidian eyes reflecting the distant explosions. The Zephyrians had evolved on a high-gravity world, their bodies dense with muscle and bone, their minds sharp with tactical brilliance. Another glorious victory for the Dominion, his second-in-command, Sub-Admiral Crixnell, announced as she entered the chamber. Her scales shimmered with the bioluminescent patterns that indicated pride among their species. Vextar's mandibles clicked in agreement. Indeed, the Corvithi thought their psionic shields would protect them. They learned otherwise. He turned from the viewport, his massive frame casting shadows across the holographic star map. What of the outer territories? Have all systems submitted? Crixnell activated the central display, bringing up a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Conquered systems glowed purple, the color of Zephyrian dominance. Only scattered pockets remained unmarked. All major civilizations have fallen or surrendered. The only notable exception is this primitive system here. She gestured to a small yellow star on the galaxy's edge. Sol, Vextar mused, examining the data. 3rd planet. Earth, they call it. Carbon-based life forms. No interstellar capability. No energy weapons, still using chemical propulsion for their limited space travel. He waved dismissively. Hardly worth our attention. Shall we send a subjugation fleet? Crixnell asked, already knowing the answer. Waste of resources. They'll submit when they see what happened to their neighbors, or they'll die in isolation. Either outcome is acceptable. The Admiral turned back to more pressing matters. Prepare the fleet for the victory ceremony. The Emperor himself will broadcast our triumph across the Dominion. As the Zephyrian fleet celebrated their seemingly complete dominion over the galaxy, none noticed the ancient probes hidden in the asteroid belts, their sensors quietly recording every movement, every transmission, every weakness. 3 days into their celebration, an archaeological team on the recently conquered world of Kepler 442 bits made a discovery that would shake the foundations of their understanding. Deep beneath the planet's surface, they found ruins that predated any known civilization. The architecture was unlike anything in their databases, angular, utilitarian, built to last millennia. Chief Archaeologist Nalvor transmitted her findings directly to the flagship. Admiral, these structures are at least 50,000 years old. The technology is unusual. Power sources that still function, alloys we can't identify, and most disturbing, star charts showing trade routes connecting hundreds of systems. Vextar studied the images with growing unease. What species built this? Unknown, sir, but we found this. The hologram shifted to show a simple plaque, its message written in dozens of languages. At the bottom, in what their translators identified as an ancient Earth script, were the words, "We were here first. We will be here last." Impossible, Crixnell hissed. Earth's civilization is barely 10,000 years old. They've only achieved spaceflight in the last few centuries. But the evidence was undeniable. As they excavated further, they found more artifacts, more proof of an ancient human presence throughout the galaxy. Ships that had traveled between stars when the Zephyrians were still swimming in primordial oceans. Colonies that had thrived and mysteriously vanished. And always, references to something called the Silence Protocol. Admiral, the communications officer interrupted, her voice tight with concern. We're detecting unusual energy signatures from the Sol system. Multiple sources, extremely powerful. Vextar felt the first stirrings of doubt. Show me. The main display lit up with sensor data. Earth, That supposedly primitive world was suddenly alive with energy readings that defied explanation. Deep beneath its oceans, under its mountains, in the hollow spaces of its moon, everywhere their sensors looked, they found power signatures that dwarfed their own reactors. It's as if the entire planet is waking up, the science officer reported, his voice barely a whisper. Then came the signal. It wasn't a transmission in any conventional sense. It was a pulse of pure thought, broadcast on frequencies the Zephyrians had thought impossible to achieve. Every member of the fleet heard it simultaneously, a voice speaking directly into their minds. For 50,000 years, we have maintained the silence. We scattered across the stars, built civilizations, and watched them fall. We learned that power corrupts, that empires inevitably become tyrannies. So we chose to forget. We buried our weapons, hid our knowledge, and returned to our cradle world to begin again. We chose peace. We chose ignorance. We chose to let the galaxy develop without our interference. The voice paused, and in that moment, every Zephyrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. But you have forced us to remember. Across Earth's solar system, ancient systems activated. On Mars, beneath the red sands, massive hangar doors opened for the first time in millennia. From the asteroid belt, installations that had been mistaken for natural formations revealed themselves as shipyards and weapons platforms. Jupiter's moons shed their icy shells to expose fortress complexes that had been dormant since before the Zephyrians had discovered fire. But it was Earth itself that transformed most dramatically. The planet's surface cracked and shifted as massive structures rose from hidden chambers. Cities that had been buried beneath forests and deserts emerged, their towers reaching toward the stars. The oceans parted to reveal vessels so large they had been mistaken for undersea ridges. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as his tactical displays updated with each new emergence. Ships that dwarfed his proud dreadnoughts, weapons that operated on principles his scientists couldn't begin to comprehend, and all of it animated by a technology that seemed less like engineering and more like sorcery. "Sir," Crixnell's voice shook, "their smallest vessels are reading power outputs equivalent to our capital ships, and they have thousands of them." The human voice continued, now carrying an edge of steel. "We are the children of Earth. We are the inheritors of an empire that spanned the galaxy before your species drew breath. We abandoned that empire because we saw what we had become. We chose to forget our power, to live as primitives, to give the younger races a chance to grow without our shadow looming over them. On Earth, in hidden bunkers and secret facilities, humans who had been selected as keepers of the ancient knowledge-activated systems that had been maintained in secret for generations. They were the Watchers, the guardians of humanity's true history, trained from birth to maintain the illusion of weakness while preparing for the day when the silence would need to be broken. But you," the voice continued, now directed specifically at Vextar, "you have conquered and enslaved. You have crushed civilizations and destroyed cultures. You have become what we once were, and in doing so, you have awakened what we tried to bury." The first of Earth's dreadnoughts began to move. These were not ships in any conventional sense. They were mobile fortresses, kilometers long, built with technology that had been refined over tens of thousands of years. Their hulls were composed of programmable matter that could adapt to any threat. Their weapons drew power directly from higher dimensions. Their shields operated on principles that turned the laws of physics into suggestions rather than rules. "We give you one chance," the voice concluded. "Withdraw from all conquered territories. Release all subject species. Return to your homeworld and develop in peace, or face the judgment of those who have already walked the path you're on and found it wanting." The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian fleet in stunned silence. Admiral Vextar stared at the tactical displays showing the awakening human forces, his mind struggling to process the reversal of everything he had believed. His empire, which hours ago had seemed invincible, now faced a power that made their greatest achievements look like the fumbling of children. As the Earth dreadnoughts continued their slow acceleration toward the assembled Zephyrian fleet, Vextar had to make a decision that would determine the fate of his entire species. Pride warred with survival instinct, arrogance with the creeping realization that they had provoked something far beyond their comprehension. The stars watched in silence as the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the Zephyrians would choose wisdom or destruction. The reckoning of silence. Admiral Vextar stood frozen at his command station, watching the impossible unfold before him. The Earth dreadnoughts moved with a grace that belied their massive size, their formations precise beyond anything his tactical computers could calculate. "Sir," his weapons officer reported, voice trembling, "their lead ship is broadcasting identification codes. It calls itself the Remember Tomorrow." The name itself was a paradox, a challenge to the linear nature of time that the Zephyrians had always taken for granted. Crixnil moved closer to her admiral, her scales flickering with patterns of fear and confusion. "Orders, sir. The fleet awaits your command." For the first time in his career, Vextar hesitated. His entire life had been dedicated to the expansion of the Dominion, to the conquest of lesser species. But what stood before him now was not lesser. It was ancient, patient, and terrifyingly advanced. The tactical analysis scrolling across his screens painted a clear picture. Engagement would mean annihilation. "Open a channel to the human vessels," he finally commanded, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. The response came not through their communications array, but directly into their minds. A human appeared on their screens, not as a hologram, but as if space itself had been folded to bring them face to face. She was elderly by human standards, her hair silver white, her eyes carrying the weight of knowledge that spanned eons. "I am Shepherd Jung," she said, her voice gentle but underpinned with steel. "I speak for Earth, and for the human diaspora that once called 1,000 worlds home. Admiral Vextar, your decision in the next moments will determine whether your species joins the community of free worlds or becomes a cautionary tale for future generations." Vextar's pride flared. "You threaten the Zephyrian Dominion. We have conquered half the galaxy." "You have conquered children," John replied calmly. "Young races still finding their way among the stars. We were ancient when your world was still cooling from its formation. We have fought wars that lasted millennia, built empires that spanned from rim to rim, and learned the terrible price of dominion." Her expression softened. "We offered you a choice not as a threat, but as a mercy. We know the path you walk, because we walked it first." Around them, the human dreadnoughts continued their deployment. Support vessels emerged from hyperspace, not the violent tear in reality that Zephyrian ships created, but a smooth transition as if they had always been there. Construction ships began assembling structures in space with a speed that defied comprehension, creating defensive platforms and supply bases from raw materials that seemed to materialize from nothing. "Witness," Zhang continued, gesturing to a tactical display that appeared between them. It showed the galaxy as it had been 50,000 years ago. The human stellar commonwealth, 10,000 inhabited worlds, technology that made us as gods, and populations counted in the trillions. The display shifted, showing vast armadas, ring worlds encompassing entire stars, and megastructures that harnessed the power of galactic cores. It was a civilization that made the current Zephyrian Dominion look like a collection of scattered outposts. "But power without wisdom is the path to ruin." Zhang's voice carried centuries of regret. "We became oppressors, then destroyers. Our wars cracked planets and extinguished stars. In our hubris, we nearly broke the galaxy itself." The final images showed devastation on a scale that Vextar's mind struggled to process. Entire sectors of space twisted into chaos, civilizations erased from existence, and weapons that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. "And so we chose the silence," Zhang concluded. "We dismantled our empire, buried our weapons, and returned to Earth. For 50,000 years, we have lived as you found us, a primitive world, struggling with basic technology, forgetting our true nature. We gave the younger races room to grow, to make their own mistakes, to learn their own lessons. Vextar felt his certainty crumbling. Why reveal yourselves now? Why break your silence for us? Because you're making the same mistakes we did, Zhang replied. And because, unlike us, you still have a choice. The galaxy doesn't need another ancient empire imposing its will on others. It needs neighbors, partners, a community of equals. Behind Vextar, his bridge crew watched in silence. The reality of their situation was sinking in. They were not conquerors facing primitives. They were children who had awakened sleeping giants. What happens if we refuse? Vextar asked, though he already knew the answer. Zhang's expression didn't change. Then we will do what we must to protect the younger races. But know this, it brings us no joy. Every species that falls to its own ambition is a failure of our vigil. The human dreadnoughts shifted formation slightly, and suddenly Vextar understood. They weren't arranged for attack. They were positioned to minimize casualties if the Zephyrians forced their hand. Even now, facing those who had conquered and enslaved, the humans were trying to preserve life. Your weapons, Vextar said slowly, they could destroy us without effort. Yes, Zhang admitted. Our gravitic lances could unravel your ships at the molecular level. Our dimensional shields make your weapons functionally obsolete. Our temporal manipulation systems could age your vessels to dust in seconds. She leaned forward. But that's not power, Admiral. True power is having such capabilities and choosing not to use them. The bridge fell silent as the magnitude of humanity's restraint became clear. They faced not conquerors, but teachers. Not destroyers, but guardians who had learned the hardest lessons of power through bitter experience. One of the human dreadnoughts, the Last Dawn, moved forward slightly. Its weapons ports remained closed, but the subtle shift in position caused every Zephyrian ship's threat assessment to spike into critical levels. The message was clear. Humanity preferred peace, but they were absolutely prepared for war. We need time to consider, Vextar said finally, his pride crumbling under the weight of reality. Time is something we have in abundance, Zhang replied. But the worlds under your control do not. Every moment you delay is another moment of suffering for billions of beings. She gestured, and holographic displays showed worlds throughout Zephyrian space. On each, the conquered populations looked skyward as news of humanity's emergence spread. Hope flickered in eyes that had known only despair. We have monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, Zhang explained. Hidden observers who have watched and recorded every conquest, every atrocity, every moment of tyranny. We know what you've done, Admiral. The question is, what will you do now? Vextar turned to his crew, seeing his own doubts reflected in their eyes. The certainty that had driven their conquests was gone, replaced by the terrible understanding that they had been playing at Empire while true power had watched from the shadows. If we withdraw, Crixnell spoke up, surprising everyone. What becomes of the Dominion? You return to your homeworld, Zhang answered. You develop as a species, not as conquerors. You join the galactic community as equals, not as overlords. And perhaps in time, you contribute something worthwhile to the cosmos. The human ships began to project energy fields that Zephyrian sensors couldn't identify. Within them, images formed, not of weapons or threats, but of possibilities. Worlds where multiple species lived in harmony. Technology shared freely for the benefit of all. Cultures enriching each other through peaceful exchange. This is what we learned in our exile, Zhang explained. That diversity is strength. That cooperation yields greater rewards than conquest. That the greatest achievement is not subjugating others, but lifting them up. Admiral Vextar felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. His entire worldview had been shattered in mere moments. Everything he had believed about strength, about power, about the right of the strong to dominate the weak. All of it crumbled before the evidence of humanity's choice. Stand down all weapons, he commanded, his voice carrying across the fleet. Prepare to withdraw from conquered territories. The relief on his bridge was palpable. His crew had seen the writing in the stars. Resistance would mean extinction. A wise choice, Zhang said, and for the first time she smiled. The path to wisdom begins with recognizing our own ignorance. You've taken the first step. As the Zephyrian fleet began the process of withdrawal, humanity's true nature revealed itself. The Dreadnoughts weren't just weapons. They were mobile civilizations, carrying within them the knowledge and culture of 50,000 years. They spread throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as liberators and teachers. On world after world, Zephyrian control crumbled as humanity's presence gave courage to resistance movements. But there were no massacres, no revenge. Human mediators worked to establish peaceful transitions, to heal the wounds of conquest, to build bridges between former enemies. The Remember Tomorrow took position near Zephyr Prime, the Dominion's homeworld. Its presence was not a threat, but a promise that humanity would watch, would guide, and would ensure that the hard-learned lessons of power would not be forgotten. We will not rule you. Shepherd Zhang's final message to the Zephyrians carried across their world. But neither will we allow you to rule others. The galaxy has had enough of empires. It's time for something better. As the cycles passed, the galaxy transformed. The Zephyrians, stripped of their conquered territories, but not their dignity, began to discover who they were without the mask of conquest. They found skills in art, in science, in philosophy that had been suppressed by their military culture. Other species, freed from oppression, looked to humanity not as new masters, but as elder siblings who had walked the dark path and found their way back to the light. The ancient human technology was shared carefully, always with the wisdom to use it responsibly. The silence had been broken, but in its place came something better. A conversation between species, a sharing of knowledge, a community built on respect rather than fear. Admiral Vextar, now retired from military service, often stood on the observation deck of Zephyr Prime's first university. He would watch the stars and remember that day when humanity emerged from their self-imposed exile. The day when the galaxy learned that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to build. We thought ourselves mighty, he would tell his students, many of them from species the Zephyrians had once conquered. We believed that power meant dominion. But humanity taught us that the greatest power is the ability to choose restraint, to guide rather than rule, to lift others rather than crush them beneath our feet. In the depths of space, the human dreadnoughts continued their vigil, silent guardians ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. They were a reminder that somewhere in the galaxy, an ancient species watched and waited, ready to defend the dream of a better tomorrow. The Galactic Fleet had thought they had it all, until Earth's dreadnoughts appeared and showed them what true power looked like, the power to protect, to teach, and to inspire. The power to choose peace in the face of war, wisdom in the face of ignorance, and hope in the face of despair. The galaxy would never be the same. And that, humanity knew, was exactly as it should be.